Today I wanted to talk about stress response and something that happened to me in my life that caused a major patterned stress response to specific situations. And basically, when I was growing up, my parents would sit me down and we'd have 3 to 4 hour conversations based on how they wanted me to be, how they wanted me to act. Whenever I had needs I wanted to have met, they would sit me down in these 3 to 4 hour conversations of why my needs did not need to be met, and basically what they thought and what they wanted to program me with. So when you think about 3 hours of being in a cortisol negative state, that's a lot of chemicals. And this didn't just happen one time. This was maybe once every 2 to 3 months this would happen. And that stress response stayed in my body to the point that when we would have one of these discussions, I would just completely tap out and I wouldn't be there. Because for one, in that situation, I didn't have the ability to know that I had control of my life. I didn't have the tools that I have now, and I certainly wasn't, super open-minded. I didn't have the tools, I didn't have the people, I didn't have the experiences that I have now. And so I created a coping mechanism of basically tapping out, forgetting whatever happened, disassociating with reality. I thought that maybe that conversation didn't actually happen. And if the conversation didn't happen, then my parents were great people and that never happened. So I would forget the conversations completely and I would just keep going along with my life. And looking back on it, it actually was, it kept me from staying in that state for extended periods of time. So I understand why I started to create that coping mechanism for myself in order to keep living, in order to have that quality of life. But then the trippy part was it started to manifest. It was there to begin with, but it started to manifest in confrontations when I needed to have my needs met, when I would meet people, friendships, business relationship, bosses, personal relationships. It ended up being really intense. I would completely forget that we had a conversation. And oftentimes I would actually forget what my needs were, or why I was having a conversation, or why I needed to hold someone accountable to the needs that I needed to have met, why it was important for me to set boundaries. And there were some situations that happened where I actually don't even remember. That's how crazy the coping mechanism was. And if I was in a state where I did remember, it was a bucket load, a total buttload of chemicals and stress hormones all released at once, which you could consider, or some may say, as a panic attack. That's pretty much what's happening, is your body is just going into a state of overstress. So this manifested in my relationships of just having complete blank spots when it came to specific life areas, because growing up, those life areas were a massive blank spot. And guess what? They don't go away unless you're consciously aware of it. So unless you're consciously aware of the things that you need to work on, and you're consciously aware of where you need to be shifting your life, if you're not consciously aware of it, it's just going to be sitting in the back. It's just a hidden program. It's part of the hard coding on your hard drive. It's not soft coding. It's certainly not soft coding. Because if I knew about it, I would have been starting to shift it. So I did start to recognize it maybe about 7 years ago. I started to recognize it. I started enforcing boundaries, even though I don't remember why I enforced the boundaries. I still remembered I got to keep this boundary because my previous self definitely thought it was important to keep this boundary, so I'm just going to keep keeping this boundary without really remembering exactly why. I would just be like, okay, I just got to keep this boundary. And it worked, but it wasn't getting the root of the issue. And then I started working with an NLP coach, Coach Lee, fucking badass. But anyways, I was working with him, And then I realized how massive this piece of programming was, because for one, I had been targeting it. I actually had been working on it quite a bit, but I hadn't gone to the root of the issue. And once I started realizing what those memories were associated with, the heart, the core of that freaking programming, now I know what I need to replace, and now I know how to step out of it. And it's a process, because you have all these stress responses, you have all this cortisol, so it needs to be released, and you have to release it. You have to reprogram it. You have to get super uncomfortable. Because oftentimes to actually heal something like this, you actually have to go through all those stress responses again, but with a different outcome. So anyways, that's how subconscious programming becomes conscious programming, becomes, oh, I actually created that programming. And okay, now that I know about this programming, now I can actually do something with it. Now I can actually empower myself. And now I can teach others how to empower themselves from that. And again, we all have different experiences to bring to the table. So you learn from your traumas, and you learn from your experiences, you learn through what you go through, and now you're that much more empowered to teach someone else how to go through that same process. So that was just a little blip here on some of the massive chemical processes you can undergo during intense experiences. And it's very real, and it's very visceral. So, and I've seen people that, they have these extremely visceral panic attacks, and they get on medication, and I understand the reason why. But medication just delays and suppresses the symptoms. It doesn't get to the root of the issue.